If you watched Etsy's latest quarterly report, you likely already know that things haven't been great on the platform. And while we saw a significant spike in Etsy GMS for the holidays, which is basically the money that sellers made on Etsy, when we measure the holiday up to previous holidays, we can clearly see a decline. And obviously, this comes with a poor economic climate, political tension, an increased cost of living, and uncertainties when it comes to new regulations like GPSR. YouTube is a dumping ground for two sides of the story. On one side, we have the sellers who praise Etsy for helping them to make hundreds of thousands of dollars, and you can do it too if you just apply this one super secret hack. The other side comes from the sellers who have chose to leave Etsy entirely, whether that be by choice, for the lucky ones, or forcibly through suspensions for the not-so-lucky sellers. Between these two types of content exists the average person who doesn't know what to believe about the platform. And yeah, despite being an Etsy YouTuber who teaches content about Etsy, not even I know the future of the platform. It does seem like Etsy has been making a few positive moves, including a reduction of drop-shipped items, which I know some of you are thinking isn't true because we still see it happening, but Etsy really has been shutting down thousands of these sellers. They just keep popping up faster than Etsy can manage, which was due to poor planning from the get-go on Etsy's part, and now they're struggling to get those worms back in the jar. In fact, from the content side, a quick search in vidIQ, which is like eRank but for YouTube keywords, shows more people searching for Etsy dropshipping strategies than searches for Etsy SEO, Etsy POD, and Etsy Handmade strategies combined. And dropshipping on Etsy is a clear violation of their policies, but by not policing those issues sooner, things have gotten way out of hand and the customers are taking note. Across Reddit, Facebook, and even Etsy social media pages, customers frequently voice their concerns about not being able to find handmade sellers, often citing that they see items on Etsy that they've also found on platforms like Amazon. And I've mentioned multiple times on my own channel that I've fallen victim to drop shipping as well after assuming that I was shopping from a small artist. The cat tree that you see back here was an item that we thought that we were buying from a small seller, but who was actually drop shipping items from China. And this is coming from someone who has been working and selling within the Etsy ecosystem for over 12 years. But as someone who focuses on raw data and scientific analysis, we have to also look at some of the glaring facts about Etsy when comparing it to other marketplaces. Despite slight fee increases over the years, Etsy is still the cheapest platform to sell on in terms of fees and listing prices, making it one of the most realistic places for newbies to get their start. Not to mention, Etsy has refined the process of getting started, making it extremely easy to sign up and list your first item, which only takes a few minutes. Not to mention, getting traffic to your Etsy shop is way easier than bringing traffic to your own website. As I've said in the past, selling on Etsy is like having your shop in a big shopping mall, where people are already actively walking around ready to buy. Every view of your shop signifies someone who walked in and looked around. Whereas with your own website, it's more akin to placing your shop in the middle of a cornfield. There is no traffic organically exploring, which means you're going to need to do all of the legwork driving traffic to your site through things like social media marketing, paid ads, and Google SEO, which is way harder to compete with in search than Etsy SEO, since you'll be competing with all of these guys as well. If you ask a random person, where can I buy handmade items, most will say Etsy, because it's what Etsy has built their whole brand around. Even if Etsy has strayed from their handmade roots, shoppers still mostly associate Etsy with handmade, something that Etsy has recently started to incorporate into their marketing as of mid last year. They're also refocusing their ad spend into the types of advertising that work best, social media ads, rather than shoveling money into things that don't work. We won't even talk about how much their 2024 Super Bowl ad must have cost, but clearly it was a flop. And that's because you can't click a Super Bowl ad on your TV and be taken right to Etsy. You have to grab your phone or your laptop and type the web address in. Whereas with social media ads, someone can see an item that they like, click the ad, and immediately be taken to a page where they can buy it, which has seemed pretty darn obvious to most of us analytical thinkers, but hey, at least Etsy has figured it out and they're doubling down on social media marketing rather than their disjointed TV messaging and weird celebrity sponsorships. Because you know what doesn't scream mom struggling to make ends meet while running a small business from her dining room table? Cameron Diaz and Martha Stewart. But again, they're making better decisions this year, so hopefully we start to see all of the impact of those choices. Lastly, there are still sellers who are making big bucks on Etsy. I have tons of students and community members who make a living on Etsy, and they aren't the ones AI generating images and slapping them onto POD shirts as quickly as possible. They are the sellers who are passionate about a niche and who work insanely hard to build brands with reputation, longevity, and genuine desire to do right by their customers. Which is how businesses become successful in the first place. You don't make money by chasing money. You make money by chasing passion, and money becomes a direct result of that. Yes, lots of people are unhappy with Etsy. And yes, tons of sellers are leaving Etsy. And yes, again, many of them are totally justified in their reasoning. Etsy has a lot of growing to do when it comes to their seller support and training of their support staff who, even with resources like AI, still manage to occasionally give completely incorrect information. Or worse, they have no answers or resolutions at all, promising to escalate cases, but then sellers never actually hear back about serious issues. But we also need to remember that negativity has the loudest voice. It's how news goes viral and how things spread. Outrage builds wildfires, and often the sellers who are doing well on Etsy simply aren't spending their time on Facebook, in the Etsy forums, or on YouTube documenting their journey. They're too busy building their successful businesses. My most successful students are my least active community members because they don't have the time to chit-chat, complain, or brag. They're putting that energy into their growth and focusing on their path ahead, which is why adaptability is one of the #1 things that I teach. If this is something that you personally struggle with, check out the book Who Moved My Cheese by Spencer Johnson. It only takes about an hour to read, but it'll change your life. Back to the point though, Etsy isn't the end-all be-all for business, nor should you see it as such. It's just a plot of rented land, and there are lots of plots of land out there where you can diversify your business if you choose to. But you aren't Etsy. You are so much more than the land where your business is located, and the most successful businesses on Etsy are those who also know that putting all of your eggs into one basket probably isn't the best strategy. In 2023, we held a mass movement online called Keep Etsy Human, which was a play on their long-standing slogan, Keep Commerce Human. Through these efforts, thousands of sellers used hashtags and made posts pleading with Etsy to start making changes to their platform in order to regain a bit of their former brand essence. The week following our movement, Etsy added this note to the top of our listing pages. And I'm not saying that some of their recent changes are related to our movement, but Etsy has been reverting back to more handmade and small business messaging, which is ultimately what they've built their brand around in the first place. But in their constant battle to appease shareholders, they've lost sight of their core values along the way. It's been nearly 2 years since our Keep Etsy Human movement, and while we are seeing positive changes, Etsy still has a long way to go when it comes to overall seller satisfaction. And obviously, nothing they do will make everyone happy, but prioritizing satisfaction of buyers, the people who come to Etsy looking for small businesses to support, absolutely must take priority, because without those buyers, no one makes money, including Etsy. Which brings me to the point of this whole big fat spiel. This week, I've started a survey for Etsy sellers in order to gauge their overall satisfaction with selling on Etsy. In the survey, I'm buckling down on hard questions in order to narrow down on some of the biggest pain points sellers are experiencing. You can find the link to the survey up here and down below, and I encourage you to share it in as many Etsy groups and communities as you can. The goal is to collect as much data as possible from as many different sellers as possible. That way, we can understand the struggles and challenges of the average Etsy seller. And while Etsy does host similar surveys with their sellers, we, as the community, never get to see their results. By conducting an independent survey, we can be a little bit more transparent about how the average seller feels, which obviously we can only do with your help. Data is only scientific the more it is quantified. So helping us to spread the word will help tremendously with outreach. On Tuesday, April 1st, I'll close the survey and begin analyzing our results. Then on Tuesday, April 8th, I'll post a video outlining our findings. content like this tends to spread to bigger outlets, encouraging Etsy to understand the challenges sellers face. Etsy's moving in the right direction. Ads like these are helping customers to understand what Etsy is truly about, which is ultimately what we've been asking for all along. And Etsy is learning from their costly mistakes in order to refocus their efforts into marketing that actually works. But as spending gets tighter and tighter, and as more small sellers struggle to make ends meet, we also need to remind Etsy that not every seller has a big, beautiful studio. Not every seller is living in bliss, and Etsy still has a long way to go when it comes to the treatment of sellers. It's a balance. There are a lot of sellers who don't belong on Etsy, but there are also plenty that represent the essence of Handmade and who are facing detrimental support challenges that aren't being taken seriously. Even though Etsy is doing better, they still aren't perfect, and we can't let loose of the leash or lower our expectations. There's still a lot of work to be done, and as a community, it's our voices that Etsy needs to listen to, not just the voices of their shareholders. Again, the link to that survey is down below. Share it with other sellers, influencers, and YouTubers. And if you want to stay updated on the results, feel free to subscribe to my channel and look for an update on April 8th.